Welcome to Central Missouri Tomorrow. I'm Chuck Ambrose. Thank you for joining us for the second episode of our show from the campus of the University of Central Missouri. This evening we'll be speaking with public school experts about the proliferation of technology in schools and the challenges and opportunities that websites such as Facebook and YouTube bring to our classroom. Chris Beltre has been the superintendent of the Columbia Public Schools since 2009. Prior to coming to Columbia, he spent 26 years in various professional roles in the field of education. He has been an assistant superintendent, an associate professor of education, a high school biology and chemistry teacher, and he has also coached a number of sports. Kelly Krause is in her 8th year as the librarian for the Knob Noster Middle School, where she teaches information literacy skills and manages library services. She serves on the board of the Missouri Association of School Librarians and is currently president of the Central Region. In addition to her years as a librarian, she has also taught both Spanish and English. Melissa Randall is an attorney and is the Deputy Executive Director of the Missouri School Boards Association. She and her staff work on behalf of the school districts to keep them informed of changes to school law and to track state and federal regulations that impact schools. She also serves on numerous statewide committees and is a member of the Missouri School Readiness Coalition. Chris, Kelly, and Melissa, thank you for being on the show and a very important topic to the viewers across Central Missouri. And Chris, I think as a school superintendent in a district that has many stakeholders, technology has to be a front burner issue. And could you just give us a sense of how a superintendent approaches it today and who you have to kind of position technology to think about in terms of users?
Yeah, we have several customers really. We have, of course, the students and the teachers are the main customers, but that has changed dramatically over the last several years. We used to worry about teachers' instructional tools, and now we're starting to worry about what can we give the kids to have them have access and manage their learning a little more at a personal level. And so with those two issues and the public funding that it's going to take to provide that, it's become unique because as more and more kids bring their own technology into schools, we've had those conversations. What do we purchase and what do we expect kids to bring with them? I think we're at a big transition time.
You know, transition time would be a good way to put it. Perhaps one of those kind of pivot points of society and culture about the use of technology. Students are coming with a whole different perspective in how they learn, and teachers have a lot of challenges, don't they, in terms of using that technology to help students learn?
They do, and I think we have to look at what happens at your own university. I'm sure you go in the classroom, the students have iPads and MacBooks and whatever technology they want, they bring into the class to organize their learning, to structure their learning, to be able to research and go and look at topics during different information settings. We have to do the same thing in the public schools. I think we've sort of been resistant of that for fear of management issues over the concern for learning issues.
You know, as a lifelong educator, you know, that presents a lot of challenges, doesn't it? You mentioned funding and resources to drive technology, but it's also an exciting time to teach.
It is. It is. I think when I go into the classroom and watch a great teacher use a smart board and bring kids up to interact with the smart board and follow the leads that the students bring up during the discussion with the world at your fingertips is quite amazing, and something when I started teaching wasn't even a thought in my head that learning could be that interactive and that in depth.
You know, I heard a simple question, you know, tell me the answer to X, and they said, just Google it.
Yes.
Melissa, you interact on a statewide level.
That's right.
State boards, not just for policy, but a generation of school leaders who have to kind of understand how fast the pace of change is. Can you just mention school boards and kind of their readiness to think about this point in time? And it's certain we're not going to do things the way we've always done them, but the excitement perhaps they have about all the possibilities it opens up.
Sure. Well, school boards, of course, work with their superintendent to implement these changes that Chris was referring to, and it is an exciting time in Missouri Public Schools and across the nation when you look at what technology can do to enhance learning for children. But school boards specifically have to allocate resources to make sure that our schools, you know, have the technology in place to help children advance, and they have to adopt policies that provide guidance on what can and can't be done in the schools with the new technology.
And certainly we'll come back perhaps to that resource question, because there are a lot of decisions that have to be made in how we expend some limited resources. But is it one of the, or perhaps the top issue that perhaps boards are struggling with as they think about priorities?
It's certainly one of the top priorities, particularly as we have more and more pressure to advance student achievement. You can't do it without technology. It is a tool that we use. It's not the only tool, but it's an important tool that we use to help our children be prepared for the future that they're going to live, the kind of world they're going to live in.
Sure. Kelly, I think when we say resources, probably for educators, for students and for parents, one of the major changes has happened within the library and access to resources. How's it affecting your day-to-day life and those that you associate with across the state?
Well, first of all, our profession has had to change directly because of technology. Technology basically means information, and so librarians are the information experts of a building, and so we, of course, teach kids how to access information, how to evaluate information, how to use the information that they find, and that's called information literacy. And so we as librarians have got to be ahead of the regular classroom teachers in a lot of ways, because we're supposed to be the experts that know which tools to use and to get kids to use them appropriately and effectively.
For a school district like Knob Noster, how much more information do you have access to utilizing technology in the library today than perhaps you had 5 years ago? I mean, what are the different opportunities that opens up for students to access not only knowledge but resources to learn?
Well, from the time that I first started being a librarian to now, it's amazing just how much has happened in the last 5 years. Of course, students have internet access, and in the past 5 years we've bought a lot of tools to give them access. More computers, more tablets, more stuff, to get them that access, to put them on the information highway. And so, of course, we have the world, as you said, available. The world, though, is it's a big place, and so they can't ever negotiate it all at once. So we as educators have to teach them how to be on the highway, and the right stops to make and the right things to do. So that's how our profession has changed a lot. Not just to give them the information, but to teach them how to find it and how to use it. And that's
information navigator, that would be quite a new term, because certainly there's places that you want to go and have to go. There's other places that you don't necessarily want students to go as well.
Right. Yeah, and the thing about information is that it does a lot of different things, and so you as a teacher have to decide what it is you want kids to do with it, and how you want them to see it. And so those are skills, and we all have those skills. Teachers are really pretty good at that. I think sometimes they get a little intimidated at the tool that the kids are really proficient in, but the kids are not quite as proficient in the information and what to do with it. So we've been trying to help them to learn that part.
And Chris, within a district, if you said those that are easy to think about technology, are students perhaps the easiest, and is there a more difficult constituency you kind of interface with?
Yes, it's those that are the immigrants to the technology world, the older population, tend to downplay the significance of technology, and sometimes do not see it as a value in instruction. They often think it's not teaching kids the right way to think, and is just an answer machine instead of as Kelly talked about, a processing tool to learn and find and navigate. And often when we go out to seek funding, you will hear a lot of those commentaries that we're spending too much on technology. We didn't need technology when I was that age, those kind of issues.
We're going to touch on many of these issues, both in how we use it and how perhaps we can guard against not using it in the correct way. Let's break for a few minutes from our discussion to get a first-hand view of what these technologies look like in today's classroom.
Students in the Holden, Missouri School District are benefiting from a grant that has provided new technologies such as iPads in many of their classrooms. While laptops in the classroom have been around for years, new technologies and interactive websites have raised the bar on student expectations. High school teacher Sally Burnett says these emerging technologies are now a permanent fixture in the classroom.
This is not your average lecture, note-taking kind of class. It's hands-on, very interactive, exploratory, problem and project-based learning. We want students to be marketable, but we also want them to be good digital citizens, and this provides a perfect opportunity for that.
But using new technologies in the classroom is not just about getting your hands on the latest gadgets. With increased access comes additional responsibility.
Digital citizenship is one of the most important skills that we can teach our students. The explosion of social media, I don't think students realize what they're giving up in terms of personal information as far as sharing. And I don't know how much instruction goes on at home before someone has a Facebook account or students are given a smartphone. So the iPads give us an opportunity to explain what is important about being safe and being a good digital citizen.
Burnett says this is a great time for students to become more self-directed learners. Technology is allowing students to keep up and to be prepared for life after high school.
The value of technology integration in the classroom, and it's very important for me to say the appropriate integration of technology in the classroom, not just throwing something out there because it's new or because it's cool. It needs to have a purpose, is that the problems that our students are going to face as they go out into the world, there's not an answer sheet for that. I mean, this is real life, hands-on, and they need to be problem solvers, and technology has changed so much just in the last 2 years. If you can't think on your feet and know how to handle change and work with that, you're not going to be marketable, and that's terribly important, especially in an increasingly competitive and global economy.
Although technology integration is critical for students in high school as they get ready for work or for college, it's just as important for younger students to become comfortable with technology as a tool for instruction. Kindergarten teacher Stephanie Atkinson says her students have no trouble switching from traditional to technological instruction.
Kindergarten students do not have any problems touching anything technologically. I mean, they just love, they love the iPad. They can't hardly wait till it's their turn to be able to use it.
In her experience, Atkinson says it's easy to identify her 5- and 6-year-old students who come from technology-rich homes and those who don't. In her view, the classroom is a great place to help equalize these differences.
I do definitely see a difference in the skill level of students that have technology at home with their manipulation with a mouse on a computer. They know exactly what to do. The ones that do not have computers at home have a little bit less coordination and have a little bit more trouble getting where they need to be on the iPad and on a computer. One of the ways that I use the iPad in our kindergarten classroom is for phonemic awareness with the kids. I use it with small group, with some of my children that are having a little bit of trouble with letter sounds or letter recognition. There are games that we can play on there where they're actually touching the iPad screen and they can name the letters and then say the sounds that the letters have. When we got the opportunity to have an iPad, I was very excited because I like using technology in the room and I know that the kids can relate to the technology. It's something that they can manipulate and that gets them more excited about what they're doing. And you know that the kids are excited to use them, and that's what we want, is for them to be excited because that's when they learn more.
There's a lot of change happening, obviously, in classrooms in Holden, and if you think, perhaps as Daniel Pink describes, there's things that we didn't even know that we could live without 2 years ago. Chris, it used to be a computer in every classroom, but we're talking about all kinds of technologies in different ways. What is some of the range of what now we consider the things that we can't live without?
I think we're getting to the point where wireless connectivity has to be seen as an absolute must. When we go to our schools, the device proliferation of technology, whether it be a smartphone or an iPad or other things, people just expect it to happen. And I have the students in Columbia Public Schools demanding to have access to wireless. My first year there several years ago, meeting with an advisory group, I said, what can I do to make your experience here better? And they said, we want wireless in our schools. And that was just 2.5 years ago, and the conversation was, well, can we control the safety? What if they get to a site that's not appropriate? How do we block that? We had a lot of resistance from the people that manage the technology because of the mandates from state and federal regulations. But we have to get past that. We have to say if the kids are demanding it, that means they'll use it to find information, to organize information, to manage their life. And so we're in the process now. I think by the end of this year, all our secondary schools will have wireless, and by next year, the following year, have wireless in all of our schools. We're using them in elementary schools. We've got some iPad technologies, and if you don't have the wireless, your iPad use really is almost dysfunctional.
An expectation for connectivity that's just a given. And if you're not connected, you're not communicating. And as you said, in Columbia, that represents a school district that has quite a bit of diversity. And of course, as a state, we know Missouri has quite a diversity from urban to suburban to rural. Melissa, you hear a lot about the digital divide and communities' expectations. We've got some initiatives to make certain we've got connectivity across the state. But are these challenges different depending on the type of community you're in?
Unfortunately, they are. You know, that digital divide is real in Missouri, and it isn't necessarily a rural versus urban suburban, but rural Missouri still does not have the same kind of resources that are available in our urban centers, and so we need to. Now, some rural communities are an exception, but typically they don't have those resources. So we do need to do a better job as state and federal policymakers in allocating resources to to those communities and give them what they need to make sure their children as well as their entire community are connected.
You know, Chris, as you said, it's not whether you're connected or not. The next level of question is how fast you are, how much capacity, how much can you download, and those are going to be challenges that are ahead of us that aren't going away. One of the comments that students and teachers have made, and they made in Holden, is that students really get excited about learning, don't they, Kelly? Can you just mention what technology does to kind of the enthusiasm to learn and perhaps some of the outcomes you've seen?
Sure. I teach a class collaborating with a teacher, and we are just trying to get the kids to use the technology. But we do, as they said in the Holden video, we want them to do it for a purpose, because regardless of the toy, the age-old purpose and audience still holds true, regardless of whether you are in a program like this or, just having a student complete a project. So we come up with different projects, and the ones where we can incorporate technology are always more successful. For an example, a student had to show what they knew about the Battle of Lexington and Concord, So they were going to do a radio show. And we told them about how a radio show went. But then once we got to put in Audacity, where they got to actually edit it and they got to record it, then it was one of our most successful projects, because the technology was just the added ingredient that made it more interesting. They felt like they had more control, they could do more things with it, and so it was a much better experience for them and for us too.
Of course, there's nothing better to introduce some decision about resources where teachers get excited and students learn. And that gets to be infectious. Do you recognize that with teachers, Chris? Is there ways in which you say across the district or in particular schools, or do principals call that out and say that that's a good thing, best practice?
Yes, I think principals, when they go into the classrooms and watch teachers effectively use technology, easily get excited about it because they realize the potential that it has. I think our biggest challenge is the dissemination of those skill sets that those teachers have and the comfort they have with making that happen in a time when we're in budgetary restraint. That's going to be a challenge for us because we know what works, we know what's good, but getting it to multiply and become more common is going to be a challenge.
Somewhat in that pivot point, isn't it? It's just where we've been and where we're going. And I would assume, Melissa, as you're thinking statewide, that one day they are going to create efficiencies, and perhaps that fundamental shift in how we do education will somewhat be driven by an iTouch environment, and that probably gets board members enthusiastic as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you see the evidence and what this can produce, it is very exciting to see what our future holds.
Well, as we look forward, we come back to a break where we'll really look at the depth of the subject of technology, not only in the classroom, but what the expectations are for both teachers and students.
I choose to finish what I start.
I choose to accomplish my goals.
I choose red to make my family proud.
I choose red because I can take classes that work around my schedule. I choose red to advance my career.
The University of Central Missouri Summit Center in Lee Summit is a convenient location for finishing your degree. Transfer your credits to UCM and finish what you've started. Learn more at ucmo.edu/GoSummit.
For incredible musical programs that you don't see anywhere else, for literary programs without commercial interruption, KMOS TV is my source.
Stay tuned to KMOS Channel 6.1, Sedalia, Warrensburg.
Welcome back to Central Missouri Tomorrow. I'm speaking with Chris Beltre from Columbia Public Schools, Kelly Krause, a librarian at Knob Noster Middle School, and Melissa Randall, who is with the Missouri School Boards Association. And we've been talking about how schools handle the challenges and opportunities that they face with emerging technologies. And it's true, we've been talking about the challenges to schools. How about to families and parents? I just, as we've thought about my own experience. I've got about a year and a half left with a junior in high school. How has it changed the interaction between teachers and parents and teachers and students? And Kelly, I may start with you. I know that's brought change, but how has it happened?
Well, you may have seen some of those changes as your child has gone through school, but certainly we have a whole lot more tools at our disposal to get information to parents about how their child is doing academically. Grades are posted online. We have several programs that when a student takes a quiz, that information can be emailed immediately to the parent. Students can check their own grades. Grades are updated weekly. Parents and teachers email each other quite a bit more than they used to. And so I think there's just a whole lot more electronic communication that goes on than used to, even 3 years ago in my school district.
You know, that may have been a disadvantage for some of us if our parents could get that kind of access ready-made.
We've had those issues, yes.
But Melissa, both as a parent and a statewide leader, and then Chris as a superintendent, does that change some expectations on the part of teachers as well because of the sharing of that immediacy of information?
Well, I think so. You know, I think that they have to rethink how they're communicating with parents, and I think there's an expectation that when tests are given and those grades are awarded, that they're immediately posted online. So the time allocation for teachers has to be adjusted so they have sufficient time to share that information electronically.
And I would agree. I think one of the things I've noticed as this has evolved, that when we started having this access, we would run into a teacher that didn't post grades in a timely manner, and that put more accountability on the system. And we've gotten much better with that. It used to take times, and we had to have a lot of emails and conversations with teachers. That's over now. But now the access with the parents is getting more to the communication, not just the posting grades. You can put things on your grade book, no matter what program it is, to where a parent can see a comment. If there's a low grade, a teacher can highlight that grade, and then it's a post, did not come in on time to take the test, did not take the retest. So you can put some behavioral issues in there as well that do a better job at explaining that, so that you don't have to have the emails back and forth. You can just leave a note for the parent. It's a great communication tool, and parents and students expect immediate communication back. And with the system the way it is, that's expected, and that should be a customer service model that we bring to the table.
You know, you mentioned the expectations for Wi-Fi, some expectations on the part of parents. Chris, one of the primary roles I know that you feel responsible for is the quality of your teachers and the recruitment of good teachers and retention. How many prospective teachers ask you specifically about the access to the technology they will have to teach in your school district?
It's becoming more and more dominant, and being in a university town, just like we are here, that we got a lot of student teachers. And what we have in our schools really is sort of our recruitment tool. It looks like they're going to have less than what they had at the university, and that they're going to have to do without. They're looking for the schools in the suburban area that tend to have more technology. So I think we have to give them the tools to do what they need to have to feel successful. It'd be like going to a hospital. When a doctor's being recruited, they want to go to the hospital and see that they have all the latest equipment so that they can be more effective in their work. They don't want to go in one that they're going to have to try to figure out how to work around situations. And teacher recruitment in certain areas is very aggressive because there are a limited number of teachers in certain specialty groups.
You know, and as you said, it's not just the access to speed and gadgets, but there's a lot of aspects of education that are changing, like textbooks, learning tools. During our break, Kelly, you were mentioning that perhaps just in even teaching a specific discipline, if you have access to certain tools, it requires that you provide. Can you just mention some of those aspects of some of the people that you interact in library sciences, but also just in teaching, that technology is changing?
Well, just to kind of piggyback on what you said, being familiar and comfortable with the technology tools, it is an expectation as a teacher. I don't know, I taught for maybe 20 years before I ever got in front of a smart board, and now I can't imagine teaching without it. If I had to teach without a document, if I had to teach writing without a document camera, I would feel at an extreme disadvantage. So, or even, you know, just word processing for a computer. So there is that expectation for a teacher just to have those tools available. It should just be, you know, the overhead projector is gone, but that was when I first started. That was the state of the art, you know, and so we are also expecting tools, software that is very expensive to help us manage data for student achievement. And so that sort of thing does carry a price tag, but it's something that we use every day and our students use, and we consider it the cost of doing business.
You know, reporting, accountability, state standards, the kinds of things that you can utilize technology to report out. But then really, as you said, tracking student achievement. We have a big goal in Missouri of 60% of our population having a college degree. There's some thought that technology can actually address some issues like remediation in ways that we currently don't have access to actually fixing. And Melissa, I'm sure that's a concern within policymakers as well.
Absolutely. Using these resources to capture these children back into the system, those who have not been successful in a traditional classroom. Oftentimes technology gives them an alternative and allows them to continue their K-12 education so they can get a diploma. But you're exactly right. We have to look for ways to continue to use this technology to keep all of our kids in line and successful.
And, you know, making kids more successful, that's where technology really gets you enthusiastic about its potential. Now, we all know that students and teachers, that interaction involves role modeling, and I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute. There's college presidents who tweet. There's applications and smartphones. Do you have a favorite technology? And if you have a favorite, do you have some form of technology that maybe you find to be that kind of hindrance during the day that if you could do without? Chris?
I use my smartphone, of course, all the time. It's organized in my calendar. It's the communication tool with the text messaging and all those kind of things I have to have in order to stay focused, because I'm out and about 34 schools every day, and so I could not do without that. My latest gadget at home, this technology, is I had to take Advil last week after boxing my wife with our Connect system. Oh. Now, I can beat her in bowling, but my wife beats me every time in boxing. It's a little embarrassing, but just the idea that you can stand in front of your TV and have this physical workout in a virtual environment just still baffles me, but it is a technology that has some learning application.
And you're fitter, too.
Yes. And, you can be a couch potato in a different sense now, I guess. I don't know.
All right, Melissa, favorite?
Well, I can't top that. I also am addicted to my smartphone. I can't, in fact, I'm fidgeting right now because I don't have it with me. And iPad, too. I think that has really changed, how not only I interact with my schedule and emails, but also I get my newspapers through my iPad and magazines and all kinds of different applications that have really made me more efficient, both at home and at work.
Yeah. Kelly, you have to have some out of your background.
No, actually, those ones that are more portable, I think that's the wave of the future. Tablets and the phones and anything that you can take, unplug from the wall and go with you. I think that's why things are moving so quickly, because we figured out how to do that, and we can be anywhere in the world and use those portable devices to get on the internet. So.
Well, it's invaded our lives without question. It's a part of, my son turned me on to an app called Stumble Upon, which if you don't know how to go out and find your information, it'll do it for you, and across topical areas. And I think both that personal, professional, the education uses is something in our next segment we'll want to turn our attention to. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to be back and talk specifically about issues involving privacy, cyberbullying, and other areas of interest to parents of school-age students.
Life is full of choices. I choose what to wear, what to eat, when to move, and when to rest.
I choose not to conform. I choose who to learn from and where to study.
I choose red, to be the one who stands out.
I choose red to discover my hidden potential. I choose red to inspire future generations.
Choose red.
Choose red. Choose red.
Hi, we're the Bacon Brothers, and PBS is important to us. My brother Michael here has composed music for the documentary series Nova, Bill Moyer's Journal, and The American Experience. Isn't that right, Mike?
That is right.
Mm-hmm. Hey, didn't you win an Emmy for writing music for one of those shows?
Yes. Have you ever won one? No. Okay. Experience you may have this year, but so far I'm the only Emmy-winning person in our family. There's also your involvement with PBS, which is a performance that you did a long time ago with a certain very beautiful young woman.
Yeah, that was American Playhouse, and it was a very, very long time ago. And I met my wife, Kira, on PBS. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, changed my life, but nothing compared to your work on PBS. People should really check that out.
Yeah, you're right.
I am?
I mean, you were great, but it's not like you won an Emmy yet.
Yeah, to hear more about my acting, you can watch me interviewed on Charlie Rose or Tavis Smiley here on PBS. Have you ever been on Charlie Rose, Mike?
Oh, he's called me a lot, but I've just been too busy.
Okay.
Well, how about we disagree? We both love PBS.
We both love PBS.
PBS is my source for engaging drama and interviews.
PBS is my source for award-winning documentaries.
You're watching KMOS Channel 6.1, Sedalia, Warrensburg.
Welcome back to Central Missouri Tomorrow. Melissa, I'm going to really come right back to you on the whole issue about social networking. It's an impact not just on public schools, but public policy. Kelly mentioned the thought about being kind of an information navigator. And obviously there's a lot of concern about where you can go within cyberspace. And can you just kind of outline some of the big issues as they involve kind of networking and public education?
Oh, sure. There are a number of legal issues, that come into play when we talk about these things, but one of the big ones is balancing an individual's constitutional rights with the need to provide restrictions on how technology is used. And for instance, there's some privacy rights that we have to balance in a public school district, students and staff, and also search and seizure if there's an issue of a child using one of their pieces of technology inappropriately, whether it's sending a message that was inappropriate on campus, or there's a number of examples. All of those things we can't ignore when we're trying to discipline a child or we're trying to develop policies and procedures. We have to account for their constitutional rights, and so there's this balancing act that we play as attorneys to determine what's appropriate and what's inappropriate in terms of conduct and how to deal with that from a legal perspective.
Conduct and content.
Conduct and content, absolutely. Some of the dark side of this is that tools can be used for many good things like we talked about, but they can also be used for inappropriate things. And we've seen an explosion of sexting, and that is when an individual, whether it's a child or an adult, uses their electronic communication tool to send images or language that is very inappropriate. And that's a huge issue for us to deal with in the public school districts.
And the impact on individuals, once that send button is hit, and of course, I guess if you were trying to sell something, going viral would be one thing, but certainly if you thought you were in some kind of private interaction, and the impact on individuals and students is very real. Chris, cyberbullying, just keeping policies up to speed, how you create awareness, how you notify, how does that challenge a district?
Well, we've recently been dealing with that in Missouri when the law went through first that said that teachers could not communicate using Facebooks in certain ways, and it was unclear what they meant. We did not adopt that policy, and then, of course, it's been changed a little bit. But I think what Melissa said is there's always been inappropriate behavior, but now it has greater mobility and opportunity, and it's harder for us to police as a school district. But as I think about it, I truly believe that if something happened inappropriate face-to-face, the chances that the school's going to be there to witness it and police it is very small. Same way with technology. Someone has to bring it to our attention. And so we're trying to keep our policies very small and to not try to put in the language of a technology or something that will change over time. Just to say these are the types of inappropriate behaviors and they will not be tolerated and there'll be consequences for those behaviors.
And this topic probably has as much meaning to parents today. Kelly, just being in the schools like Knob, would there be specific things that you could advise parents to just be aware of? You have opportunities in middle school, but obviously some of the commercials that point out the iPhone in the hands of an infant, this access is much younger. But what could we tell parents?
Well, first of all, being in a school, you'd have to be able to get a hold of the parents, and that's something that we really do have a challenge. We have programs that we, have evening programs or those kinds of things to educate parents, and we don't get a lot of attendance. So we are trying to come up with ways to go where the parents are. So we try to give information through websites or through our school Facebook, or try to combine them with things that are popular, like a PTO chili supper, and try to do these kinds of education programs if we can. And of course, the most important thing that we tell parents is to be aware and to be involved, and then we try to give them resources, pointing them to websites and things that will help them make decisions for their student. There are lots of tools out there to help parents with how to be a good teacher of netiquette, and they need to do it as well as the schools. And so we do have programs. We're required by law to help students with those kinds of issues, and so we do try to teach them the proper way to behave online and what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. Every student signs an acceptable use policy, as do all of our teachers, and so we teach them what that means, what it means to be an acceptable user. And parents have a role in that as well. So we try to get information out there, sources that they can access themselves, and then just be available, anytime a parent has a question.
So understanding that parents probably would have a very difficult time necessarily keeping up with their kids on technology. Your two comments is probably most important. It's critical for parents to be aware what your students and your children are doing, and to be involved to a point that to the best of our ability, that we don't want them going to places that are unsafe. How about from the practitioner's side of technology? Has to be some anxiety out there about interfacing with students. Now, we're trying to draw some new lines. Any thoughts, perhaps at the state level or the system level for teachers?
Well, I think, one, we have to realize that we've got to do a better job educating teachers on the risks they take, not with intent, but being, inappropriately pigeonholed into something. That the teacher has a risk, and the policies aren't always to simply find a way to punish those that are doing inappropriate things, but it's also to make sure that the teacher understands there are certain domains that once you enter, you put yourself at risk for being someone accusing you of a certain behavior. So that the teachers need to understand that communication with students really needs to be as public as possible and on sites that can be monitored.
It's kind of a different way of thinking about guilt by association, isn't it? I mean, it's not, as you said, in person, it's just where you go.
Right.
And there's obviously places that we wouldn't want our students going or our teachers. At the state level, we do have a lot of policies that are trying to keep pace. What would we tell policymakers in terms of safety, student well-being?
Well, that's a great question. Well, you know, we've kind of dealt with that this year. The bill that was passed last session, to give you an idea how complicated this area is, General Assembly passed it last year in 2011, and we had to amend it in our special session in September because this area is incredibly complicated from a legal perspective, and part of that law was being challenged and was probably going to be thrown out by a court. So from a policymaker's perspective, is finding that fine balance between appropriate use of technology and not crafting laws that make it so restrictive that we make the technology not useful, but at the same time crafting laws that protect our children and our staff from these kinds of inappropriate behavior. That Facebook law that made a lot of attention, or got a lot of attention in Missouri and nationwide, how it was amended, and we threw out the provisions, the General Assembly threw out the provisions that restricted a teacher's ability to have a Facebook site and friend students, and we replaced it with the requirement that boards adopt a policy by March 1st of this year to prevent inappropriate communications and conduct with students in electronic forums. So we still have our work cut out for us on how to, you know, continue to shape state and local policy to move forward on these issues in protecting kids and students.
You probably anticipate that with the pace of change that, as you just mentioned, our policies today, 3 years from now, we'll have a whole nother set of opportunities and technologies. Where do we turn? Is there some best practices? Is there resources that parents could go to?
Well, I think there's lots of web resources, especially when it comes to cyberbullying and inappropriate behavior. We've recently been hitting real hard in the Columbia Public School systems the awareness for students to understand what cyberbullying is and the impact it has on the lives of others. So we have educational opportunities. We bring in some powerful people to present and talk with them. And it is simply amazing what the kids will share and let you know how much cyberbullying is going on. I think every time I sit in those groups, I'm just amazingly shocked that the type of communication that's going on every day with our kids, and it's outside of our control as public educators, but that doesn't mean it's outside of our jurisdiction to teach and make sure that they have a better understanding of it, because it is the real world, and public education is supposed to be about giving them the tools to cope and navigate the world.
You mentioned netiquette, but you know that's a whole nother way of thinking about what you say and who you say it to. And of course, it's so very different when you don't have a physical interaction to even engage, and you're afraid for students, and we certainly wouldn't want that. The flip side, I guess, heard recently the fact that Nike as a company had not hired anyone by use of a physical resume. It was your ability to network, and that network could include your cyber footprint and how you gain relationships and formulate. And so we're certainly at a pace of change where setting reasonable parameters is what schools have done to have expectations for performance and behavior. But certainly setting parameters is something that's required on an everyday basis when we get into the school setting. And any other suggestions for parents?
Well, I have a child that's getting ready to get his driver's license, and I would find it difficult to teach him how to drive if I didn't know how to drive. And so I think it's important for parents not to be afraid of the technology, but to get comfortable with it and understand what their kids are using and what they're doing with that. I'm kind of have to be shoved and pushed into this area because I didn't grow up with it. Obviously, I'm in the generation that I'm learning this at an advanced age. But I became a Facebook friend, and I got involved in Facebook so that I can monitor my child. And it's opened up, real learning opportunities, opened my eyes to what the world these kids are living in now. And I would just encourage parents, don't be afraid of it, but get involved and know what your kids are doing, know who they're talking to, know how they're communicating.
Driving for the first time, it's a great analogy. And as you know, internet privacy is a major issue that schools and parents need to address. Tom Durkin, Public Education Director for the Missouri Attorney General's Office, has tips and warnings that we can all take to heart that would extend beyond this conversation.
Well, what I'll share with you, you probably already
In October of 2010, Governor Nixon proclaimed October in Missouri as Internet Safety Month. And the Attorney General saw that as an excellent opportunity for us, for our office, to get seriously involved in this discussion. And so I came here today initially to talk to the students about things that I know to be true about internet safety, and then this evening to talk to parents, because the parents really are our first line of defense. Now, what has happened, and it's probably a cultural evolution. With the advent of technology, parents in some fashion are abdicating their responsibilities. You even see it with young kids. It is so easy now, if you have small children in your home, or you're running a daycare place, to pop in Cinderella on the VCR, the DVD player, and the kids are mesmerized and they're entertained. And so the days of parental interaction have changed over the decades. And the same is happening in some fashion with technology. For young people, it is part of their DNA. They intuitively understand it, and older people don't. So there's this awkward gap. And I think in some cases it's just too uncomfortable for the adult to bridge that gap. And so, as I said, in some cases they just abdicate their responsibility because it's such an uncomfortable journey for them, and they don't know that much about it, and they presume that the kids aren't making any trouble and no bones are broken, so I guess everything's okay. And it's not. The number one growing crime in America today, according to the FBI, is identification theft. Culprits are getting our identities, name, date of birth, social security number, and they are using that information to apply for credit cards, and then they max out those credit cards, and of course they leave the person who had their identity stolen to have to clean up the mess. And the target audience is not people, they're not people my age, because people my age are aware that we need to check our credit reports. A 10th grader is not. And they could be the very ones who are out there who are freely giving out this information. They invite friends to their birthday party and they say, hey, I'm turning 15 on Friday. Come to my house for my birthday. So now anybody who's watching that chat understands that this person, Tom, is having a birthday. He's turning 15 on Friday. Do the math. I can figure out his date of birth. Tom, where's your house? Oh, it's 2658 Corona Circle. Come on by. That's great. Tom, if I get lost, can I call? Sure. Here's my phone number, 8484-245. Now, inadvertently, this young person has left out there for other people to access personal information that can be used against them. So, we think of the predatory problem, and it certainly is out there. But identification theft is even a bigger problem, and parents and students are not even thinking about those types of consequences.
If I could be the teacher to go out and spread the word on this, then this wouldn't happen. So I'll at least give that pitch for him.
There is a significant level of interest in the part of policymakers, districts, teachers, students in where the world's going with technology. There's an element that certainly drives much of that, and that's our ability to invest in the tools required for us to be effective. And of course, that's an easy way to say, where are we going to get the money to drive the kinds of changes that technology really is expected? Chris, going back to what you said, Wi-Fi, hardware, and every day you've got to consider what you're going to do with your district's budget.
Yes, and Kelly and I were talking about line item budgets for technology, and that's not been the way that public schools have managed it. They usually would go through bond issues because it was a large purchase, and it usually was something somewhat unique. We're past that. It's not a big purchase anymore. It's a maintenance purchase. And our technology doesn't last 5 years. Really, capital projects should not be used to buy technology. what we're doing in Columbia Public Schools is moving to a levy that hopefully will pass April, that we will line item the instructional technology tools for teaching and learning. The big items such as switches and fibers and the backbones will be handled through bonds and bond issues as necessary. But we need to start telling our teachers we will plan to have the technology that is necessary to teach with this line item budget. Just like we do with textbooks and other materials, it has to be something that every year we know there's a certain line that's going to allow us to purchase those resources.
It's the chalk and pencils, isn't it?
Absolutely,
today,
yes.
In terms of utilization of tools. There's a couple issues I would like to touch on, because obviously the use of technology has a direct impact on skills gap. And what students know in terms of the outcomes of the experiences of our schools, but also how we spend those resources may impact some inequities depending upon how much money districts have to utilize, whether it's line item or obviously that's a fundamental change to say this is the cost of operating a school. But maybe perhaps some of the statewide issues involving resources from a school board's perspective. Could that drive some difficulty?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've talked some about the digital divide today, and we've talked about the inequities that's created by that, and certainly a statewide policy needs to reflect the growing inequities that we have in Missouri with the haves and the have-nots in terms of these issues. Also, taking it to a local district level, we have to think about those too as we implement changes in policies and requirements. If a child is expected to have this technology in order to proceed in a course of curriculum, then the school has to either provide those resources or make sure they have access to them, working with their community to make sure the library can offer those resources or have our computer labs open after hours. But if we, this is a local, state, and even a federal challenge that we have to work on, making sure everybody has equal access.
And of course, within this economic environment, equal access to resources to teach and learn, for some families it's just very difficult to make ends meet. So trying to make decisions about what technology you invest in for your kids. Kelly, we were talking before the show, there's some districts that are just basically saying bring your own technology.
Right, and of course that brings up a whole other set of issues. There is a school district in Kansas City that has done that, where they can't necessarily afford for every student to have a computer or some sort of portable device, so they're allowing students to bring their phones and their computers and their tablets, and then they just hook them into the network. And so for those students that don't have, then they do have some available. And for that school district, they say it's working very well. So that may be some way that we could open that up and not spend as much money. I don't know, but we do need to look at that, because in order for our technology to move forward, we do have to have a plan in place. And so far, it's just been sort of piecemeal because it's just hit us so fast.
Mm. And I would add that the school that Kelly's speaking of is a private school. They're not under the same kinds of federal regulations and oversight that we have, and that's been causing some problems about how we stay within what's required, but allow kids to bring in technology and still go through the filtering and the proper things we're supposed to do. I think we will see the private schools maybe lead the way on this, because they can move a lot quicker and they're more nimble than we are in the public sector, but we absolutely have to do this. We have to allow the students to bring what they have so that we don't have to spend it all. Years ago, when kids came to school, pencils were used to be on the supply budget because they were such a big item. Well, now the computer is the same thing, and if a kid has it, great. If not, we need to supply it. We do that with a lot of things. Technology shouldn't be any different.
And students know, they know which technologies best fit. We're definitely seeing changes in learning styles. Yes. Could all three of you maybe just mention that in regards to perhaps what that means to the student? Because if you think about perhaps bringing your own equipment, what best suits you, do you see a wide range in the library, Kelly, when you're dealing with kids?
Sure. I think that technology is going to put students more in charge of their learning. And, we've had this buzzword called differentiated instruction, where you change your instruction based on how you learn. And I think technology is a wonderful tool for that. And students bring their iPads and their Kindles and all this sort of stuff with them, and they're not allowed to use it during school, but they can use it after hours, and I see them using it. So they're already doing it. It's just a matter of coordinating all that so that they get the best learning environment that they can have.
Central Missouri Tomorrow is very grateful, especially from the three very distinct perspectives you each bring to this topic. I have a feeling that since this is a future-oriented show, that this is not just today's tomorrow, that it would be fun to come back at a time specific and see how you're doing with your wife on your Connect at home. And
I'm going to take her down there.
And then probably even to think about some of those things that we could look back and say, well, we should have thought of that. Mm-hmm. But we're very grateful for your time and energy and perspective, and one that I think our viewers will very much appreciate. We've seen from our panelists that technology has the potential to have an enormously positive impact on education in Missouri. But there are challenges, both educational and financial, that we must continually address as new technologies evolve. Melissa Randall, Kelly Krause, and Chris Beltre, thanks to each of you for your efforts in helping Missouri schools move forward. We truly do appreciate your efforts, and thanks to our viewers for tuning in to Central Missouri Tomorrow on KMOS TV. Good night.